this summer, I went to, I paid a nice little admission, and it was worth every penny. But I went to KW, now has one of their communities, is called KW Wealth. And they had a class in Austin. They offer it, I believe it's every other month or every third month. It's like once a quarter. And it's in Austin, but I will tell you, this will be the best money that you ever spend on yourself or your family. There's a ton of homework to do before you go, but it was very much worth it. And it was some of it was humorous, because it said, you know, we want to, part of our homework is we had to build a plan to be worth $50 million in the next 30 years. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I'm just gonna be very honest with all of you. I'm 56, I'm like, I wonder if I would even be on this planet. I better be on this planet, but you know, those things run through your mind. And but it's not so much about getting to 50 million, it's the path and the choices and the things that you're gonna make in order to do that. And if you don't have a plan or a GPS, you know, you're gonna stay and continue in the same spot where you currently are. So I highly recommend this. They also have you read a book before the class. Also, as I said, there was a lot of homework. The book's called The Lifestyle Investor, and the author is Justin Donald. We were fortunate in that we were one of the first wealth building classes, and they were actually able to get Justin to come into the class. It was a surprise, and he was able to present. I'm not a big Audible person, but I couldn't get the book here in time in order to read it, and so I had to listen to it on Audible. And I'll just be very flat out, he's very arrogant. I'm listening to the book, and I'm just like rolling my eyes, you know, but it was very good information. But when he came in person, he was a completely different presenter, and it made me go back. My book showed up when I got home, and I went back and reread the book, even though I had listened to it on Audible, with a completely different mindset. So both, you know, again, fantastic.
My guess is if you're worth 50 million, you can be a little arrogant.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So,
but one thing Brian and I talked about was, since everyone's on different journeys, we wanted to kind of get an idea, because we don't want to just do this one time. We wanted to kind of offer this over several months, if you guys want to do that. What would be some of the goals, or what would you like to get out of this class? Anyone?
Don't all talk at once.
I would like to be more comfortable buying rental property.
Okay.
I'll take that. Okay.
So investment.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
I would like to get more comfortable helping those who are starting and helping explain a long pathway that it takes to get from worth nothing to worth wherever.
Are you talking about clients or agents, or both?
More agents in this room, but clients too.
Okay.
It's just like you said, that guy was arrogant. How to present that without coming off of being arrogant, because, you know, unless you came from a lot of wealth, we all sit there going, at times, sometimes, how am I gonna pay the rent this month? So how can we help those who are at that point to get to the next point and give them some guidance?
So a guideline to start investing or start building wealth?
I think that's a good way to do it, just, you know.
So I would like to figure out how to convert my rentals into passive investment versus.
I teach a class on that.
Did it involve a trust, the DSWT?
It's part of it, that's a goal.
I'm not sure it trusts them.
I
The
have
control
testimonials if
thing.
you want to talk about it. Okay, so I always come to these things because I think financial literacy is under-taught, and especially in the self-employed pathway. So when I think about wealth, I think about how you structure your business, what investments you make, things like, your life insurance, or how you're setting up your estate, different tax strategies that self-employed people can utilize to help lessen the burden through HSA, or, different opportunities, or how do you maintain your wealth in real estate if you choose to invest in real estate through 1031 exchanges, how to go from an active investor to a passive investor at some point as you retire, your portfolio and things like that, so.
I think that's kind of what Brian got into a lot of that in that KW class. The people I've talked to that went to that class said it was life-changing.
Gotta get on a plane though, unfortunately.
Kids are old enough, they're sleeping
Last
tonight.
thing's
Anyone else?
An escalated way to start over. I had to start over due to some extreme health issues, and some not covered medical expenses, but gave me my life back. So starting over.
Anyone else? Is that a good list?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if we can cover all that,
Okay.
we'll have millionaires by the end of the class.
You'll see Glenn and I brought our library of books up
That's
here, and
cool.
we'll talk about some of these, and if we decide maybe to do a book club or whatever, obviously Myra's book's up here. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you haven't read it, Robert Kiyosaki is a fantastic author, and, most of you probably have, but I just wanted to start, with just reading, from the opening of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's called The Road Not Taken. It's a poem by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubt it if I should ever come back. Shall I be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And that kind of leads into, some of you may know this, but Robert Kiyosaki in his second book called Cash Flow Quadrant talks about the 4 different types of,
Does everyone know
oh,
Kiyosaki? Show of hands, that name sounds familiar, that name doesn't sound familiar,
okay.
half or so.
He did. He wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad was his first book. Cash Flow Quadrant was, I think, the second. But they talk about the different, the 4 different quadrants of money. And the first being, where are my notes? That you stole. Thank you. I'm not writing.
Oh, all right.
Okay, do you want a different color?
No?
Okay.
I guess we can do.
So we all start in the first quadrant, which is E. And in E, you have a job, so you are the employee. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You have a job, you're an employee. This is the first quadrant. Second quadrant, and you want to do the arrows?
Down.
Yeah. Because you obviously want to get to, the goal in the cash flow quadrant is to get to the 4th quadrant. The second is you're self-employed. You own the job. So I think most of us in this room are there, yes? And then you would move from self-employed to business, no, sorry.
Oh, you're going up?
You're going up. business owner, which some of us in the room are also as well, and whether that's, you know, rental properties or your own real estate team and you have an S corporation, whatever the case may be, you move into a business owner where you own a system that actually works for you. Most of the time, you're still required to be there. And then from business owner, you move into investor, where your money works for you, and you don't have to show up.
And this is what we call passive income.
For chit chat.
But,
For just chit
We were just saying,
Oh.
it seems like it makes sense to just start there.
can we just start there?
If you inherit $3 million, you can.
That's right.
Creative financing.
And again, with this,
Probably.
with having different groups in the room, we don't, it's just some of the things that, you know, are you working off of a P&L, profit and loss statement? Do you have a net worth statement? And if you don't, these are all, I realize probably half the room does and half the room doesn't. Rachel, I've got stuff for you later that you'll be excited about. I don't wanna overwhelm everybody, but it's, part of the thing, they gave us this wealth plan scoreboard that it would, part of it was like, ah! But also part of it was, it was some really good questions to ask through, everything from your insurance agent, your financial planning, et cetera. So, where are you in that process?
Here's a question. Who has disability insurance?
Had it, do we?
So I would highly recommend having cancer,
Still have some.
having had cancer, that you get disability insurance, because you never know, especially if you're the main breadwinner or the business owner, you never know when something's gonna stop your employment and stop your income from coming in. I would definitely talk to your insurance agent and get disability insurance. Most people are like, oh, it's expensive, oh, I don't need it. But I'm telling you, that's when the medical bills, the expenses go way up. You have no income, but your expenses go up. Yeah.
For those who don't know what it is, can you explain very
Disability insurance, you always see the Aflac commercials on TV. Basically, that's what it is. Aflac is probably the leading business out there that provides disability insurance. It pays you when you're hurt and or sick and you can no longer work.
KW does provide that under the real agent perks as well, just so you're aware.
And even if you can't get full coverage, get something, because I'm telling you, like, I tried to work when I was sick, and did a fairly decent job at that, but, our medical bills just, even with full insurance, just stacked up, so it does become a challenge.
And back to the KW insurance offering, if you've not looked into that, Josh just did it because his wife carries their insurance, and he did it as a comparison, and it was almost the exact same coverage for the exact same cost. And she works for a large hospital, so.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a nice perk that KW offers to their agents. How many of you were at Myra's class last week? How many of you got a book?
Audible.
I have it.
I think I have it.
So in here, and I don't know how far you've gotten into it, but she asked the wealth questionnaire, and the thing I loved about Myra is she's like, I don't drive my money, I don't wear my money, and I don't live in my money, which is a lie, because you can ask her when she comes back in January what she just bought on Friday, but it was a deal, it was a deal. So, wealth is defined as an abundance of valuable possessions or money. In my opinion, however, wealth differs for everyone. It's not necessarily tied to money or things. I see wealth as a choice you make in how you live your daily life. You can enjoy a wealthy life without having a lot of possessions and money. The following questions can help you identify how you view wealth, which will help you figure out what financial freedom will look like for you. So number one, how do you describe wealth? Number two, what do you need to have or own to think of yourself as wealthy? Number three, how do you feel you are wealthy? Number four, how would your life change if you were wealthy? And lastly, what are you willing to do or give up to start your journey to wealth?
So how many people in here have a definition of what their definition, their own personal definition of wealth is? Show of hands. Okay, who has, well, if you don't have that, then I think it's probably gonna be pretty hard to have a plan or a long-term goal. I think start with that definition of what you really feel wealth is, or what you personally feel like I will be wealthy if, and then you can start a plan to get there. I think without that definition, it's gonna be a little challenging to come up with a long-term plan to be wealthy if you don't know what wealth is. How many people have an end goal, like I wanna be worth X amount of dollars by the time I'm 45, 50, 65, 75? Okay, so again, I would say that's,
Start there.
you got, yeah, that's a really, like, okay, and what does that number mean? Is that, you know, one analogy I'm gonna use is Brian told me this years ago. When he went into his accountant, he was talking about profit share, and his accountant really didn't get our profit share model. And he said, well, that's only worth that much money. And Brian said, yeah, but I get that every year, it's passive income. And back then, I forget what it was worth, but Brian's accountant said, oh yeah, when you look at it that way, that's worth X amount of dollars sitting in an IRA or a 401k account, because it's passive income. You don't need $10 million sitting in an account kicking off 4%, that $400,000 if if you're getting $400,000 from someplace else, so.
He almost got fired. It's like, if you don't realize this is one of my 7 streams of income, then we don't really have much else to talk about. Does everybody have a piece of paper, blank piece of paper? We're gonna do a little exercise. You can figure out how many days you have left on this earth. So if you would write down what your current age is. The current average life expectancy right now is 90 years old. So take 90 and subtract your current age. And we'll leave you with a number of years. And take that number of years and multiply that times 365. Everybody's got those calculators. What's your number? I'm gonna put you on the
So
spot.
you're me?
Yeah.
16,060.
Wow,
Wow.
wow.
Great.
20,805.
Renee?
15,330.
Sue?
5,475.
You best get busy. So that's our potential remaining days on this earth. We do not have time to waste, so get busy.
So I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and they even broke that down farther. He said, I wanted to really make it hit home. I wanted to see how many hours I had left with my junior high children before they leave to go off to college. Because then, when they go to college, they're pretty much gone. They come home for the summer, they work, they're traveling, they get a job. So he broke it down how many hours he had left with his kids. And it was amazing. He was like, so you look at those hours, and every hour that you have available that you're not spending with your kids is an hour gone that you'll never get back. And I thought that was really powerful. And whatever it is, spending it with your spouse, spending it with your grandparents who are older, you can do that same exercise. My grandparents will be dead, or life expectancy of 90. How many times do I get to see them a year, and how many hours do I have left with them? And I think when you start internalizing some of those things, it's a little easier to get focused on either work or, you know, to make money and build wealth, or to at least get focused to start a plan of action.
So what we just passed out is what keeps people from being a millionaire. Number one, they need to visit their capital. They don't trust that that the assets, their wealth is in, will hold its value. I know I'm guilty of this. I'm on Ameriprise way too often, which is not a good thing right now. Number two, people are a paper millionaire versus a cash flow millionaire. Paper wealth is based upon the high multiples, feels false, so they want to get their wealth back to tangible. Number three, there's an urge to be liquid. They think cash is real and everything else isn't as real, so they have a constant need to convert all assets to cash at some point. Number four, debt. The weight of debt causes them to want to pay it off, and without sufficient cash flow, they see selling assets as the only means to pay off the debt, and they don't trust the assets to hold its value, so they sell when they think the timing is right versus buying right and holding forever. Number five, the need or the urge to live high on the hog before their cash flow can support them that way. This causes them to need to liquidate regularly to cash in future earnings potential today so that they can live high today. And for those of you who didn't hear me say this, and this is a perfect time to do it, cancel your credit cards once a year. You can ask Zach. I was so pissed the other day because I didn't, and I had a bunch of apps that renewed, and I had a note to do it in October, and I couldn't figure it, and I was like, oh, I'll just do it before the end of the year, and the apps renewed in November, and I missed out on $280 that I'm now paying for apps for the rest of the year. And David laughed and he goes, you have shoes that cost more than $280, but I could have had another pair of shoes if I hadn't done that. So, and it's annoying, but
Cancel your card or your apps?
well, if you cancel the card, then it
Well, that's
cancels
true, but
the
if
app.
you had a card for 30 years, you paid a long time, gotta get your credit score starting with a 7 or an 8.
That's right.
So I would not cancel your card, I would cancel
No,
your app.
you say, I lost my card, it's gotten
You
stolen.
lost your, yes.
They
Oh,
send you
yeah,
a
new
one.
number.
I'm
Yeah,
not,
new
I'm
number.
not closing the, I'm not
Gotcha,
closing the
gotcha,
credit. I'm
okay.
saying yes.
I love that one.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you
I
for
like
that
to do that
clarity
to
for
my
both
staff
of
once
you.
a year, and they really like that.
Gotcha.
And we did that here, Renee, when we switched everything from Huntington to, and then ended up, there was a whole bunch of
And COVID hit, I guess.
things that the market center was paying for, that it was like, do we really need this? So,
Now I get to make a decision.
they don't see people as an investment or an asset. They don't have a written down wealth building plan that they trust. They got rich instead of purposely building wealth, so they actually don't know how to duplicate what caused them to get rich. And they spend more money than they make, or spend all that they make. Either way, no money available to invest. And they don't study money or the rules of investing. Again, if you don't do anything else, go get this book. It is phenomenal. I've read it twice already, and it's an easy read. It's a little long, but it's a really good book. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
We're gonna put together a list of all the books that people have told us to read and that we've personally read, so you guys will have that the next meeting.
And how do we get stuck in the middle? The stuck in the middle is average, which is most people. The far end is complete failure, and the opposite is massive success. And to get to the middle of life at anything, all you have to do is what you like to do. And if you want to get to the right side of average at anything that really matters to you, you must move past what you want to do and do some things that you don't want to do and that are uncomfortable.
Can anyone think of the realtors, one thing that most realtors refuse to do, but they know they should do it?
Call past clients.
Lead generation.
Yeah.
Lead generation's the number one thing that if you lead generated, you would build the business to then have the clients to have a business that is profitable. If you don't lead gen, I always tell everybody, all the new agents, you can't be a realtor unless you have a client. Once you have a client, then you can practice the art of real estate. If you refuse to lead generate, it's gonna be a long, hard road in this business. And that's along the lines of anything, you know, save, you know, stop the Starbucks and save the money to get the down payment on the house, you know, don't drive the 5 Series BMW, drive the, you know, entry-level Toyota, so you can have the extra money to then, you know, do the painful things so you can build the wealth.
And you can drive a nice car if you have a good accountant.
I don't.
In other words, the measure of your success in life is in direct proportion to what you're willing to do when you don't want to do it. How many people own investment properties in the room?
Good.
Okay, how many want to? Okay. One of the other, things that we looked at on here, and this is just, we can go into this in a little bit more detail, but, was to talk about what is your criteria in owning an investment property. And, I think a lot of people talk about, you know, well, I don't have the money, you know, or I'm not sure where to start. You know, part of it is just, you know, is taking that first step. And if you don't have the money, then go find somebody to partner with you. You're a realtor, you have a real estate license, get out there, find the opportunity, and somebody will back it.
I think before you start that, does everyone understand the benefit of owning investment properties?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions on owning or buying investment properties?
I know there's questions on that, nobody's asking.
There's gotta be,
I
yeah.
think the biggest question for me is making it actually passive and cash flowing,
When you, what's your definition of passive?
not being actively involved at all.
Okay, so handing it off to a property manager and just letting them do all the work and you have passive income?
Yeah, I don't wanna be a property manager, I don't
Yeah.
wanna, I want it to be similar to how I invest in stocks.
Yeah. Well, I think you can do that.
You just can't, I
What's
just
it
can't find
worth
things
to
that
you?
cash flow.
What's it worth to you?
Exactly.
Would you do that job if it was worth it to you?
Probably not,
No?
no.
So you would do all the other jobs instead of that job? Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's your pain threshold, or what's most important to you. Would you buy a property and give away all your profit if you knew it was gonna appreciate it had no cash flow, but it appreciated 10 or 12% every year? So it depends on how you look at it. Like, I look at investment properties as, do I have cash flow right now, or do I have appreciation?
Or tax savings.
I bought, a property in Art or Grandview, and it didn't cash flow at all. But I knew Grandview was about ready to boom, and I've made, I don't know, $120,000 in equity in 3.5 years. But it now just started cash flowing, because, you know, with the economy and now rents went up, and now I'm like, okay, now I've got a property that's got equity in it that I can take out to go buy another one. But it didn't cash flow for 3 years, but I didn't care. And I was the property manager, and my wife was like, when are you gonna rent this? I'm like, I'll rent it when I find the perfect tenants that aren't going to cause me a lot of trouble running down there so they Venmo me my rent every month, and I've been to that place maybe 4 times in 3 years.
Nice.
So I'm the property manager, but I don't have to deal with it. I don't do anything really.
I think I've had both ends of the spectrum, where now I have 2 great tenants in my properties. One of them cash flows, one of them doesn't really, but I also haven't had to do anything to it, which doesn't bother me, so, it's like a glorified savings account. But I've also had the tenant where they didn't pay all during COVID, and then you have to get the attorney involved, and then they trash the house, and I spent $20,000, you know, painting and flooring, but it also appreciated in that time, so, you
Yeah.
know, $130,000 of equity.
Dan, what did you look for in your investment properties? Did you look for cash flow, or
Yes.
you wanted cash flow?
Yeah, I was older.
Yeah.
I was 66 when I began. And so I decided that I needed to have a net of $500 a month. Where with younger folks, $100 a month is plenty. You know, if after you paid all your bills, if you net $100, you're younger, that's a good deal, because as you grow, as Glenn said, you can take the monies out of the property, the equity that you've earned over time, and invest them in yet another property. But see, I'm not there anymore.
Right.
You know, at 76, I'm in a little different ballpark here. So I started, 8 years ago. $500 was what I needed. I couldn't do cap rate, I couldn't do cash on cash. I couldn't use those, what were the traditional, ways of looking at properties. So I just set an amount. And then I looked for properties that, first and foremost, I felt were rentable. And then I looked at why. Why would you rent this property? Well, in my opinion, and again, for the ease of that, was schools. So each of my properties are in a desirable school system, okay, and very, how to put them, I keep them in great shape, okay, because I invest the monies back into them, increasing their value, and at the same time also increasing their desirability. So when I have a transition of tenants, it takes me about a week. And I want that week to be able to, again, make another investment in the property that will elevate its value on both sides of that. But, that was where I started. Now, all those properties are now worth twice that, almost,
In 8 years.
in 8 years.
Right.
Yeah, and the latest one I just bought a year ago, and it's already, at that $1,000 versus the 500. And that was thanks to our government, who told everybody that rents are going up. So, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful property, you've seen it.
So I think you have to start with an investment strategy.
Yeah.
You know, like when I started years ago, my goal was to hold everything. I was not selling anything. And, because I couldn't get it to cash flow in the beginning. So, but the appreciation has outdistanced that, to the point now that I've held so long, the tenants have paid the mortgages off. So now it's all cash flow. So you just, I think you, like Dan, he had a strategy about what he wanted to do and how he had to do it. I think you just have to kind of whistle that around in your brain and come
Well,
up
anything
with-
will cash flow if your down payment's big enough. That's important.
Well, that's true. But usually we don't have any money when we start, or not as much to invest. And then, so we have to find, like for me, I started by living in the investment property. I lived on one side and I rented the other side, and that's how I got my foot in the door.
Right now, time is such the highest value variable in my life, that like having somebody that I haven't gone to for a couple years, that sounds great. As soon as it becomes an issue where somebody has to call and, all the times I'm dealing with, I'm like, that's it, I'm out, like, I don't have time.
So I would challenge your mindset on that to say, if you would have bought an investment property 3 years ago and it would have appreciated 50%, do you think that's worth your time?
Yeah, I could also argue that if I bought the right stock, it would have appreciated the same amount, and I wouldn't have to do anything.
Well,
but-
that, I
but
knew
I
nothing,
just-
yeah,
that's-
I knew
I'm just
nothing
being devil's
about
advocate.
stock,
I'm a
but I
believer
know
in real
houses.
estate investing. I just know I want to.
Can't you just put property management into your
Yeah,
budget?
That's exactly, that's
Part
where
of your
it's
payment.
like,
Yeah.
I have to make
You're
sure.
gonna have taxes and insurance, why not have a property, just put a property manager
Yeah,
as a
and
budget item.
what I'm hearing too is like, I think I've had these very hard and fast rules of like, it has to cash flow X. It has to be, and then, but realizing like, okay, if I can't get the cash flow with what I prioritize, which is my time with a property manager, it doesn't necessarily mean I can't invest in it, because there might be other things that make it worthwhile doing, or if I feel like I've found that great tenant, where I don't need the property manager.
Here's the other thing about investment properties versus stock. Investment properties, somebody else is paying for them, you're laying the initial investment in it, but somebody else is actually
leverage.
paying for it.
You're putting yourself in a
Nobody's
quadrant
paying
for
for your stocks, but you.
Right, my favorite time of the month is
Started that.
last day of the month when I get all the mortgage statements in, and the first day of the month when I deposit all the
Rents.
rent.
Yeah, when you start tracking your equity and your mortgage pay down and you're looking at what that property is now worth, I mean, that's, I think one of the things we need to talk about probably moving forward, is diversification. You can throw all your money in the stock market, but that's not really a diversified portfolio. Where's the passive income coming from? Like, I know, one of my friends from Cleveland came down and taught 7 streams of passive income, like 2 years ago maybe. She bases her whole wealth strategy on, she wants 7 streams of passive income, and that's not 7 properties, that's only one, her properties are, that's one stream of passive income, where then she invested in a title company, and then she's got her business, and so, all these different
Profit
things.
share.
Yeah, profit share, she has a lot of profit share, so, yeah, I mean, so, I think she's got 9 different streams of passive income, but to build wealth, you either have to be the business owner, and one of the things that Kiyosaki talks about is ratios. Do you have 1 employee or do you have 500? Who's probably making more money, the factory owner that has 500 employees, or the person that has 1 property that is bringing in, monthly rent? So you need these forms and areas that you can invest in that are giving you passive streams of income.
I'd also like to learn more about how to get money for investment. What's the best strategy to do that? Because I'm also here to learn for my daughter, Shannon, who is at the beginning of her investment journey. So I'd like to get a better sense of the finance piece.
Like her
Whether
save, where she's gonna build her
Where
down
she's gonna
payment.
get the down payment, whether it's better to partner with somebody, how does that look like, what does
She's
that
got
look?
you as a mom, hello.
Well.
Well, I think there's all different places to
Yeah.
Start
get
by
money.
living in it, 3.5%, 5% down.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
living in it.
A second mortgage,
Does she own a house already?
She owns it, and, her goal is to keep that as a rental property
Good.
and buy something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's tons of people.
My sister did that because I was too stupid to figure it out. She's 6 years younger than I am, and when they moved back to Cincinnati, they bought a double, and they moved into one side was really nice, and one side wasn't, and they moved into the crappy side, rented the nice side, and that covered practically all of their mortgage payment. They fixed up the crappy side, and then rented that out, bought a condo, kept that, fixed that up, kept that up and rented it, and then went and bought a single family house. And so now they have 3 rental income, rental properties, and I mean, and this is a social worker and a minister. So they listen to me, but. And if you don't, like I said in the beginning, I mean, if you don't have the down payment, partner with somebody. I mean, Zach and I talked about that with our team members. It's like, if you find the property, that's half the work. Let that be your investment, or maybe it needs rehabbed. And David and I have we followed, when we got back, we were in the market and then got out, and when we got back in, we were obviously older, but our goal was to have all of our rental properties paid off by the time that I turned 60. I'm 56, so that's 4 years from now. But it was Jimmy McKissick's plan, and we just tweaked it a little bit, and he would make sure that he always had 30% equity in a property. So if he put, if it needed fix up and he put 20% down, he would put 10% into repairing the property or bringing it up to speed, or if it was more than that, just make sure you've got 30% equity, and then whatever, he would finance the rest. We ended up, he was younger when he started, and we weren't, so I didn't want to finance anything over 15 years, and so we just made sure that when we were calculating what rent was gonna be, so because we didn't buy just every property, it was like some qualified, some didn't. But in order to qualify, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and a property management fee had to be, we had to at least be renting it for $100 more than what that payment was. And we didn't, like we said, like we were talking about earlier, we didn't really care that it didn't cash flow that much. I mean, you could sit there and go, well, that's only $1,200 a year. I don't care. You know, somebody else is in there paying the rent, and when it's, you know, in 15 years, it's gonna be paid off, and then there's gonna be cash flow. And then the other thing that we do is we meet with our accountant twice a year just to decide, you know, to go through and decide, you know, are we charging enough rent? If it's a property, we had one that we got rid of 2 years ago that it was a great property, and as far as, you know, and we never had that one property managed because it was easy. It was a condo, you know, it was a simple, you know, it was usually a plumbing or electric or an appliance issue. Those were easy phone calls. It wasn't a lot of noise. And so, but it also, based upon our accountant's calculations, we weren't getting market rent. And we were never gonna be able to get market rent. He was like, this property is probably never gonna be worth more than it is today. Sell it, pay the capital gains, and use it to pay off some other stuff. And that's why we're living on Ashbourne Road, so.
Does everyone have an accountant?
A good accountant.
I think that's the key too, is get good advice from your accountant. Trying to do your own taxes with, you know, that's fine, but you're probably not as savvy as a licensed accountant. You don't know all the tax deductions. Ideally, we shouldn't be paying taxes. There's enough places where you can write off taxes. The corporations pay most of the taxes. They're not looking at middle America to pay a ton of taxes. You should be able to write off, especially if you have an investment property or two, you should be able to pay off or not have too many taxes.
If your accountant isn't bringing you good ideas, or Joe and Sue and I used to go to Star Power Conference back in the 90s, and I would come back and we'd have one of the breakout sessions there was all about tax benefits. And I'd come back and talk to my accountant, and he'd be like, oh, I didn't know about that, I didn't know about that. And I'm like, why am I paying you and I'm bringing all the good ideas? So that's when we changed accountants, and it made a huge difference in our lives. So don't short yourself on that.
Personally, I find that a good financial planner offsets that need for an accountant. Mine is that, but at the same time, the financial planner looks at everything before I even take it to him to make sure. And they work in tandem. Okay, so there's always thoughts that are coming from both of them. And a good financial planner, I find to be the most valuable part of what I've done.
Yeah.
And that word is a short word, but good is hard to find. Like in the CPAs or the financial planner, like not one who's just trying to sell you their products, and that's all they focus on.
Stanley, I enjoy going to see Stanley because I come with the ideas and he says no, and then we argue, and then I learn, and it's all good. Like paying off one of my investment properties. And he said to me, no, you're not to do that. You keep that money, you never know when the next one's gonna come along, and he was right. And I bought the last one a year ago.
Yeah, so one thing I would take away from Dan's story is he started buying investment properties in the 60s.
66.
So don't think like oh my God, interest rates just went up. What were interest rates when you started buying 10 years ago?
8 years ago.
Or 8 years ago.
They were 4.5%.
4.5, you know, and people
And
were
then
buying
I
investment
refinanced
properties
them all.
in the 80s.
Now they're at 3%.
Yeah, but people were buying properties in the 80s, you know, investment properties in the 80s with 17, 18, 19%. So it's all how you look at it. It's all about using the best strategies and getting the best advice.
Right.
But I'll let you wrap this up. I got it, 11 o'clock, I got it.
Okay, all right. Well, you have a 12 o'clock, so if you have an 11 o'clock,
Yeah, 12
you're
o'clock.
really late.
Hey Brian, one
Yeah.
thing I think people don't think about, especially if we're talking about real estate investing, is some of my best opportunities have come from listing opportunities. Some of the houses that I've bought over the years. So, you know, if you're sitting at the table and you're talking to a client, you know the house is a little bit in disrepair, or depending on what their situation is, I found that it's beneficial to have that conversation.
Yeah.
I think we go into like protect the client whatever the house, but
Yeah.
a lot, for, at least for me, the couple that I've bought from potential clients have been beneficial to both them and myself.
Mhm. And there's a lot, I mean, there's a ton of ways to find off-market properties as well. I mean, I've obviously been doing this for 35 years. I mean, I know a lot of other realtors that are out there that own rental properties, and I just stayed in touch with them. I mean, and the last two that we purchased it was the same couple, and they wanted to sell one year and one the other, and I'm like, name your price, and we ended up, coming to an agreement on both of them, and you know which one of them was.
I did.
Yeah, so, and they were both great values, so I mean, it's out there, but again, it's work, it's not easy, it's not gonna fall in your lap, and so.
I've always found that if you give yourself a deadline, and I've always had my coaches hold me accountable to that, like, okay, I need to buy a property by this date. And it's amazing what you actually start looking for when you know you're held
Write it
to
down.
something.
Yeah.
Or if you share that goal with someone and you hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
It happens a little bit better, quicker.
So it's about 5 till. Any questions, concerns? Is this something we wanna continue doing, maybe at some different levels? I mean, I realize part of the room is here, and part of the room's here, and some's in the middle, so. Okay.
Love it.
I can tell you, I don't know if all of you heard, but Myra will be back on January the
25th.
25th.
Mhm.
For the second part of her class. Obviously, we've got the holidays coming up and the new year, so look for, we'll get something on the calendar maybe the second week of January, and then we can break down into some smaller groups then.
You should just find a partner. You should say, I'll give them, you be the person.
I'd like to add one thing,
Yeah.
to anyone who doesn't own investment properties, the very first one is the hardest one. That's the tough one. Once you gulp, take that chance, then all of a sudden it gets to be contagious. Then all of a sudden, once you find out that things are going well, I manage my properties and I enjoy my tenants,
You're really making
okay?
yourself in
And, I wish I were younger.
there.
I do, because I would have, if I started out at the ages that most are here, I'd have 45, 50, 60 properties, probably apartment buildings and you name it. Because like I said, once you begin and you realize, the benefits and, in my experience, the fun of it, okay, that's my retirement. I don't use that word, let me stop right there. As I transition, okay, I still have another business that I'll remain in full time, and that's being my own property manager. So that takes some time, but not as much as you think. If your properties are in good order, if you take the time, to really, I have a person who vets them and advertises, okay, but then he gives me a name and says you ought to meet these folks, and then I sit and interview them so that I can see personalities. And honestly, I try to scare the hell out of them. I tell them I'm OCD, I'm everything perfect, I'll check on you every 3 months, I'm gonna want in. How do you feel about that? And you'll see the response in their eyes. I mean, you're in the people business, okay? So you should be able to feel if they're being truthful with you or not. I need the lawn cut. It's gotta look exactly as it does when you move in, to be able to be a part of the neighborhood so that people don't get angry with me, okay? Or it devalues the rest of the neighborhood. So it's gotta be perfect. How do you feel about that? On the application, it says, do you have a lawnmower? Do you know how to use it? Okay, and then I go in and I try my best to scare them. I do. And that's why every one of my tenants, they're wonderful folks. I even go and get the checks because I hope to meet them. How are things going? you know, and we chat, where are you in this, you know, and on and on and on. It's very enjoyable, it's how you manage it. But I think the first question is, who's your tenant? Who is your tenant? Who is that person? And then that's the property you're looking for. And then why would they wanna live there? Okay, you have to have a reason. Okay, and if you can put those two things together, and again, if I were much younger when I started, I would not have looked at, end of month statement. I wouldn't be as concerned as I was when I started at my age then.
We also have several property managers, here in the brokerage, so if that's something that you're, if that's a hangout for you, please talk to Jill or Lori, and they'll give you the names of who those property managers are.
I use Rich Mays, and he does the vetting, and his wife, they do the open houses. And I really like Anya, his wife, because she looks at the women that come in. And a woman looking at a woman.
Is the
Okay.
recording stopped?
She told me,
Is the
No.
recording off?
she told